Hey there! In this video we will take a look on how to create this wonderful graphics menu. Players will have the ability to adjust the game's display resolution and quality settings. Throughout this video we will utilize the new input system and the recently introduced UI Toolkit, although the input system is not essential for the core functionality. If you are interested in diving straight into the scripting aspect, feel free to skip the input handling section. For this video I've set up a brief scene, a simple plane with a few objects, to demonstrate the functionality of the quality settings adjustments. The most noticeable differences resulting from the quality changes can be observed in the shadows. In the high fidelity settings, the shadows appear quite sharp, whereas in the balance settings the shadows have rough edges, and for the performance settings no shadows are present at all. By the way, the quality settings I'm using here are the default ones you would encounter when initializing a new project. To start creating a graphics menu using the UI Toolkit, you will first need to create a new game object in the scene. To do this, you can utilize the UI document menu option. After that, create a new folder named UI, and within this folder create another UI document. Once you have done this, open the document to continue working on it. The document will be opened in a UI Builder window, allowing us to easily drag and drop visual elements such as buttons and drop-down fields into the document. If you are familiar with the HTML and CSS standards, you will find the properties of each element to be quite recognizable. Next, I created a visual element which acts as a container. This container is positioned absolutely covering the entirety of the game window. To establish a background, I introduced an additional visual element. This background element should be included as a child within the previously created container. For the background's color, I opt for a darker shade to create a noticeable contrast, enhancing the visibility of the upcoming form fields. Next, proceed to create two buttons. These buttons will serve as the cancel and confirmation options. Place them as child elements beneath the visual element, which acts as a wrapper. It's worth noting that any newly created visual element also has a flex grow value of 1. I typically deactivate the setting and reset to 0, as it is rather bothersome to work with. The background also needs a position absolute spanning the whole window. To move the buttons to the bottom side of the screen, we use the good old margin top of Auto. Next, just change the label of each button accordingly. The left button will be the cancel button and the right one will be the apply button. Finally, we need to remember to drag the created UI document to the UI document component, else you will not be able to see anything of the UI in the game. As you can see, I also disabled the graphics UI game object in the scene view. I've chosen to disable it in order to utilize the escape key for opening the pause menu. You can leave the game object also enabled and just skip the whole input handling part. This is up to you. In order to handle input from the player, we create a player game object. I also created a player script, but actually you don't really need it, so just leave it out. In order to handle input with the new input system, we need to set up the input package. Go to the package manager and choose the Unity registry to find the new input system package. Install the package. Whenever Unity asks you to restart Unity, you should just click yes. Next, in the project settings, enable the new input system by choosing New Input System under Active Input Handling. This will disable the old one. You can verify that the new system works when you see the Input Manager tab having a red warning. Add a player input component onto the player game object and use the Create Actions button to create a new input action map. Also make sure to use invoke Unity events. Of course, you can use any other method of sending input events, but for this tutorial we use the simplest way. Finally, don't forget to add the input system UI input module. This component will make sure that your UI document will receive click events from the new input system. Also, drag the module to the player input and click on Fix Module. For the player input, we just need to create a new action, which we will be called Pause. We will use the Escape key to open the graphics menu. By the way, please also enable the keyboard and mouse checkbox. I forgot to enable it in this video. If you have done everything correctly, then you should be able to add a new action for the pause callback. Here I moved the graphics UI game object into the action and set the object as active. Next we do the scripting part you were waiting for. Add a new script under the graphics UI game object and call it graphics UI. For the script you can actually check out the description. There's a link to the GitHub repository with this script attached, so you can just copy and paste it. For the first iteration we will add 3 variables. The UI document UI, which is the component where our UI is attached to, and 2 variables for the buttons for cancel and apply. In the onEnable I initialize the UI variable with getComponent. Both the cancel and apply button can be queried by their name. This is very similar to jQuery or document query selector in JavaScript. Next, when you have the buttons initialized, add a click event. One for cancel and one for apply. As we have an onEnable, we also need an onDisable. Here we just remove the event functions. For the onCancel, disable the graphics UI game object, and for the onApply function, just leave it empty for now. We will come back to it later in this video. Now, with all these changes, when you start the project, you will see an error popping up. This is because we didn't actually assign the name apply and cancel for the buttons. Open the UI builder again and change the name for both buttons, then it should work. Okay, now comes the fun part. We add 2 drop-down fields for our display resolution and for our graphics settings and put them underneath a settings container. For both of the drop-downs, I've chosen a white text color. Make sure to give each drop-down field a name. The first one will be display resolution in my case, and the second one is the quality. These are necessary again as we need to initialize our drop-down fields and we need to query these fields. As you can see, currently they are just empty, doing nothing. Now, add 2 more variables in the graphics UI script. Both are drop-down field references for the fields we just created. In order to initialize them, we create 2 more functions and call them in the onEnable. The init display resolution function is a bit more complex and needs some clarifications here. First, we query the drop-down field for the display resolution. Then, we assign the choices. The choices is a list of strings which will be displayed in the drop-down when you click on the field. Here we use the link syntax. Link is a more functional approach to do array manipulations in C#. The select is very similar to the map function in JavaScript. Next, we assign the index. The index is the currently selected value and will always be the current display resolution. In order to find the current resolution and therefore the index, we need to map each resolution with their index and find the first resolution where the width and the height are equal to the current one. Then we can just use the index which we mapped previously. The init quality settings function is much simpler. We just query the drop-down field and then assign the quality setting names as a list of choices. We do 2 lists because it's an array previously. The current selected value is just the current quality level as it returns an index as a number. If you have done everything correctly, we have a beautiful populated display resolution and quality dropdown. For a real game, this should be styled with some CSS of course. Finally, let's also add the apply function, which is in this case super simple. Essentially, our primary action is to adjust the new resolution based on the currently chosen index from the resolution dropdown. The same process applies to the quality settings. This approach also ensures that the selected settings are retained and saved in the game. Therefore, when you relaunch the game, the previously saved settings will be restored. While working with the editor window, you will observe that the changes do not bother the display resolution. In order to see the display resolution changes as well, it's necessary to build the game. Okay, cool. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, feel free to write a comment, and if you want to see more useful tips and tricks, make sure to subscribe. See you next time.